Welcome to Introduction to Narrative Elements with your professor, Dr. Lydia CdeBaca. The purpose of this video lesson is to introduce you to the narrative elements of point of view, character, setting, and conflict for identification and analysis during the close reading process. In this lesson, you will learn the importance and relevance of narrative, learn the definitions of 4 narrative devices, learn how each device functions as a literary element, and learn strategies for analyzing each literary element in short fiction. In previous video lessons for this course, you were introduced to elements of language and literary techniques that authors use to craft works of literature. This video introduces literary elements that authors use specifically to craft works of narrative fiction. This video also takes a slightly different approach to introducing each element by incorporating videos composed by students and others to provide examples of each element. Narrative is one of the most exciting forms of literary understanding because narrative elements, like the ones you are learning in this video, structure so much of our lives and provide tools for success in your education, your career, and even personal and professional relationships. In this video from the World Economic Forum, Jack Ma, a Chinese business magnate, investor, and founder and executive director of the high-tech conglomerate Alibaba Group, explains why creative knowledge and critical thinking are the most important attributes of an education today. Knowing the elements of narrative and how they operate allows you to empathize with others by knowing how perspective or point of view works, by knowing the role that setting has on the kind of person or character that a person becomes, by knowing how speech, thoughts, and actions allow us to characterize the people involved in a certain situation. Narrative even allows us to recognize positive and negative ways to manage or avoid conflict as obstacles to our goals. To begin, let's look at point of view. Most students are familiar with 3 to 4 types of point of view. First person, in which the action is limited to one person's view and understanding. Second person, in which the action is usually limited to one person giving advice to or writing correspondence to another person. Writing correspondence is called epistolary, narrative based on the writing of letters or correspondence. Third person limited, in which the action is limited to the narrator's view and understanding, but is not written in first person. And third person omniscient, in which the narrator knows and sees all, allowing us as readers to know actions or potential consequences that the characters themselves wouldn't know. As Jonathan Kohler reminds us, point of view is one element of explaining who tells a story. Another element is focalization, or what we're allowed to see through the narrator's telling. You can think of focalization as a lens that the narrator applies to the way a story is told, and what we as readers have access to as the events unfold. Some elements that contribute to that lens include the timing. From what point on a timeline is the story being told? How much focus is given to the past, the present, or the future? How quickly or slowly do the events take place? Another element that contributes to the lens of focalization is limitations or access to knowledge. What is it possible for the narrator to know? At any point, is the narrator able to access knowledge that she or he shouldn't have? What does this suggest about how reliable the narrator might be, or how self-conscious the narrator might be? Sometimes in third-person omniscient narration, narrators will slip into the thoughts and actions of a specific character. This is called free indirect discourse, or sometimes people refer to it as free indirect speech. It's a form of third-person narration in which the narrator slips from their position above the action or dialogue into the indirect speech or thoughts of a single character. Even though the narrator is in third person, he or she goes from reporting what the character is thinking to actually voicing the character's thoughts in the stream of the narration, leading us to believe that the narration is limited when in fact it is only limited to that character for a brief moment before returning to the broad scope of the whole scene or action. According to M.H. Abrams' A Glossary of Literary Terms, characters are the persons represented in a dramatic or narrative work who are interpreted by the reader as possessing particular moral, intellectual, and emotional qualities by inferences from what the persons say and their distinctive ways of saying it, the dialogue, and from what they do, the action. Characterization is the strategies or techniques an author uses to develop a character. The following video provides a useful strategy for analyzing characters and characterization. The setting in a work of fiction is, quote, the general locale, historical time, and social circumstances in which its action occurs. It's also the physical location in which the action takes place. Setting contributes to the plot and narration, as the associations of particular settings have an impact on how characters behave, how they react, and how the action itself unfolds. Sometimes the setting can even be seen as a character itself. Think, for instance, of the library in the Library of Babel, or the ice or sun in Storyteller. These are forces with which the characters and narrator must reckon in order to tell the story. This quick little video wrap that you're about to see gives you a sense of the importance of understanding the role that setting plays in fiction. Conflict is a central element in the development of a plot. It works in tandem with each of the other narrative elements to drive the action forward and give it a sense of purpose, as the action builds toward establishing a clear conflict and then works to resolve it. The following video defines how writers can build conflict. Let's take a look at how conflict is defined here and then expand that definition to appeal to more literary contexts. While conflict can certainly appear in the form of a specific obstacle to be overcome, very often conflict in literature also occurs between two characters, a protagonist and an antagonist, for example, or between the protagonist and fate, nature, or even between competing desires in the protagonist's own thinking or character development. How conflict appears in the narrative and how it gets resolved relies on how the other elements work together in the telling of the story. In this video, we have introduced 4 narrative elements: point of view, character characterization, setting, and conflict. To analyze narrative, one observes and questions how each of these elements interacts with the others and with language in order to achieve or convey a central idea. We'll put these elements into practice in class in all future essays. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me or ask them in class. Thank you.